Welcome back to my channel, Navigating Midlife Live. And thank you so much for taking the time to pop in and join us today. I am super excited to have Michelle Ho with me today. This is a session that I've really been waiting for. So the topic, how women over 40 can break free from restrictive eating, dieting, and rebuild trust with their bodies. And it's really interesting when I always say about, rebuilding trust with your body. And I think that we sort of take that trust relationship between our sort of ourselves. I know it doesn't sound like it's a separate entity, but for some women, they really disconnect from their bodies. So before we
Mhm.
get into things too deeply, I'm going to just tell you a little bit about Michelle. And Michelle, I can't even really remember where I met you. I know we met on some type of a online networking or something like that. I can't.
I'm actually not sure either. Yeah, somewhere down the road.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Michelle is a certified nutritional therapy practitioner, binge eating recovery coach, and she's the founder of Michelle Ho Wellness. After breaking free from her own binge restrict cycle 8 years ago, she's helped dozens of clients do the same, rebuilding a peaceful, nourishing relationship with food and body, free from restrictive diets, uh, through her holistic 4 keys framework. Michelle blends mindset coaching, functional nutrition, nervous system regulation, and self compassion to help people create sustainable, health supportive habits for life. So, and as your profile says, you kind of come from direct experience when it comes to I kind of hate to call it eating disorders, more of maybe, like you say, restrictive eating habits or eating habits that aren't supporting your body. I don't like to label foods as good or bad, healthy, unhealthy. I always like to say that food is either going to get you closer to your goal or further away from your goal, or, sort of restricting what your body actually needs. So we were, chatting a little bit before the session started. And I guess, do you want to share a little bit of your story, Michelle, before we kind of get into a few sort of topics and stuff?
Yeah, sure, I can. And by the way, just kind of bouncing off what you just shared, in regards to like the phrasing of disordered eating, I definitely understand your kind of like almost aversion to that. Especially when I was struggling with was binge eating, emotional eating, restrictive dieting, although I wasn't aware that I was restricting at the time. But I was very averse to the idea that it might be called something like that, and I sort of remain there. It kind of depends. The phrasing's nuanced, but what I do what I do believe is that things like binge eating, emotional eating aren't necessarily this disorder where it's like there's something wrong with you.
Right.
It's more like more is that something is wrong with what you've been trying to force yourself to do. It's like the dieting culture, the way that we diet, the way that we're told to, the way that we're told to interact with our bodies. That's what's wrong. And then a symptom of that can become this sort of disordered eating, this weird relationship with food where you feel like you're self sabotaging yourself in various ways, eating in ways you don't want to, but feel like you almost have to. So
Right.
anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And I think too, sometimes what can happen is with people is, I think it's sort of human nature. We like labels.
Yeah.
So in a way, when you're given a diagnosis of a condition, disease, disorder, whatever,
Yeah.
um, people will sometimes tend to hang on to that as an identity
Yeah.
rather than start to move away from that. So yeah, so that's why I'm sort of careful with the terminology. But what you say
Mhm.
makes an awful lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and careful for the same reasons, and well, also just I also just I'm not in a place where I could diagnose or treat specific um, eating disorders. So there's that too, just on the legal side of things and moral side of things. But um, yeah, it's also good to be careful because yeah, you can start to associate it with who you are instead of just this kind of problem that you're dealing with and that you can get through actually. And that's the reality. You can break free from a struggle like binge eating, bulimia, emotional eating. I've seen way too many people do it to believe otherwise. So
Right.
yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So yeah, so would you like to share a little bit of your story just to give people some context of
Right. Yeah.
why you're passionate about what you do?
Yeah, yeah, I'm passionate about it because I struggled with binge eating and emotional eating myself for probably about a decade and some change, from my teens into my late 20s. I was struggling with that kind of on and off, and um, not to give too much story, but I was somebody who a lot of people considered a healthy eater, the fit friend, I was the friend that people were like, How do you eat so healthy all the time?" And because my struggle was in the background when no one was looking. Um, and I find that's the case for a lot of people. It's like, you go to work and you have your little healthy lunch and you go about your day and then at home when no one's around, that's when you're at the end of the day and you're tired and you start sneaking towards those foods that you've felt like were off limits. And that was the case for me. So I went through a lot of different kind of trials of solutions, various diets, books, courses online, lots of different strategies to try to solve the problem. But it wasn't until I actually hired a coach, and this was just a standard life coach. I hired a standard life coach specifically because I didn't want to be labeled as having a disorder. Um,
Right.
and so went to this coach and she pointed something out to me. She said, "Do you think, Michelle, that perhaps the fact that you have not eaten something all day until 2 p.m. and then you're just eating a small salad could be part of why you're feeling like it's so hard to stop overeating at night?" And this was just a genuine question, when she was just looking at like what I told her my life was like. And it was this aha moment for me of just like, oh my gosh, for somehow that wasn't apparent to me that those two could be connected. And so, um, long story short, the biggest thing that helped me break free from this problem was actually learning to nourish my body, eat enough, um, stop restricting so severely. And then, of course, there was more detail to that in regards to also learning to nourish my nervous system, regulate through emotions, things like that. But the biggest thing that really helped was learning to nourish my body.
Wow. And I know, we talked about a few points, and I know I indicated a few points when I advertised, this session, but I want to focus on what you're talking about right now about nourishing your body, and that habit of not eating till about 2 p.m. and then having a salad, and whether that related to what the rest of the day went like from there
Hmm.
as far as what you were eating. And I know that you had commented on the episode that I did on intermittent fasting, where I basically said I believe that intermittent fasting can be a type of an eating disorder for some women because we're not going to question it, right? It's
Hmm.
something that's so widely talked about that intermittent fasting is good for our body for various reasons, and we're not going to question it. But then, trying to get in the calories getting in enough food to give our body the nourishment that it needs, one can still be very controlled, or it can get out of hand, right? It can get into that binge eating. So it's very interesting that life coach that you were working with kind of pointed that out to you. Uh,
Mhm.
and it was sort of, I guess kind of settled in the back of your head of, hmm, there's some validity to that, right?
Right, right.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then and then there's the whole culture around, typically, and it's starting to happen to men more so, but as women, we've been told for so long, right? You want to lose weight, cut your calories. So I run into a lot of clients that literally are not eating enough calories to even maintain what their body needs
Mm,
to nourish itself. So
right.
um, what are your, I guess, what are your thoughts on that, as far as when you're working with people, or the types of clients that you run into? Do you see that sometimes they are sort of using, say, intermittent fasting as a way of also kind of controlling what they do with their body and how they nourish their body?
Um, yeah, well, the answer is yes, absolutely all the time. So and that was one of the things that I did. And I should say this too, because I bet there's people who can relate. So when I was struggling with binge eating, I was intermittent fasting, and that's why I didn't eat until 2 p.m.
Okay.
And if you had asked me then, I would tell you this makes me feel great. I'm energetic during the day. I feel fantastic. Like this is good for me. And I was thoroughly convinced of that. But it's a matter of, I had this binge eating problem. Something I was doing was apparently not really working for me. And there's this disconnect between like what my brain thought was like this is good for me versus what my body was really telling me when it was like, hey, we're no, we need to force you to eat. And we're going to eat no matter what you say. So but
Right.
yeah, I see it all the time, and I loved how you talked about intermittent fasting because you had a lot of nuance, and you had a lot of like, okay, this, but this, and it depends on this. And it's like intermittent fasting isn't inherently a bad thing. It isn't wrong for everybody. Um, but like if a client comes to me and they're intermittent fasting, especially if they're not eating all day until later, um, usually have to stop that for at least some time,
Right.
um, because they're doing it usually driven by just totally restricting calories, and the reality is they're not eating enough, of especially of the good stuff, especially of the nourishing stuff. And
Right.
so it's making it really, really hard, if not impossible, to stop overeating when you're just under eating like that all the time. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So, one of the things that I guess that I've found with working with clients, is sometimes there can be, and this kind of even happened to me personally. There can be life experiences associated to maybe starting an eating habit that we haven't had before, because I would always say I've always had a good relationship with food up until the point when my mom had a major stroke.
Mm,
And probably somewhere I would use sweets as a bit of a comfort. But it became like, it became quite, what would I say? I was constantly doing it after
mm,
my mom had her stroke. I was constantly using sweets and pastries and stuff
mm.
to comfort myself. So
Yeah.
I find that it can happen
Mhm.
based on life experiences, but I think that there's also a connection to sometimes how we grow up, the messages that we maybe, excuse me, the messages that we heard at home when we were a kid, whether that was around, our body, in shape, or whether it was, well, you better get in there because there's only enough for, all four of you, and if somebody else
Mhm.
gets your portion, those types of things, like people that came from big families, right? And maybe money was
Yeah.
tight. Do you find that there is a connection to sort of life experiences or past experiences when we were growing up and how that would affect us as an adult and the eating habits we would have?
Um, so definitely yes. And but what's interesting about how those experiences do impact, of course, the way that we think about food and interact with food. Um, and there is so much variety in how that looks that it makes me wonder how worthwhile is to ponder that, if that makes sense. So, for example, I have many clients where they grew up with a lot of shaming actually around their weight, whether that was coming from parents or maybe school classmates, or maybe elsewhere, but they were shamed about their weight. They were put on diets when they were very young, when they were still a child, still developing. Um, and there's a myriad of reasons why that would cause problems with eating later in life.
Mhm.
But then on the other hand, there are also people who didn't experience shaming like that. And like, for example, someone like me, I grew up, I could eat whatever I wanted. I didn't struggle with weight. I was naturally very thin. And yeah. And so and there wasn't anyone shaming me. But it came in another way. Like I watched other people in my family who did struggle with weight, and I would look at that and I would think, and how they would be talked to, and it would, and then there's our society, the way we're so driven to focus on weight, especially for women, and keeping lean as possible all the time, and that's always good, which isn't the case. That it pressured me. I thought if I started to gain weight, I was worried that it would people wouldn't like me anymore, that I wouldn't be pretty anymore, I wouldn't be attractive anymore, and so um, it played into how I behaved around food later in life too. Um, so does that make sense? So like, there's all these different ways that it influences us, and yet the solution is still the same. It's giving ourselves permission to eat. It's nourishing our bodies well. It's learning to have mindsets that are more helpful around how to eat and how to make healthy changes. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Long-winded.
no, no, no,
Yeah,
no, that's okay. And I guess it shows how complex this topic can be, right? Because
yeah,
you can't say that it's just one thing, or it's sort of one trigger, because there's so many components to it,
right.
right? It's the environment that we live in. It can even be the environment that we work in. I remember when I was working, when I first started working, there were so many women that I worked with that were on diets.
Mhm,
That time, Weight Watchers was really
mhm,
popular, and I remember them watching. Actually, I even remember there was a woman that worked for my parents. I remember her being on Weight Watchers, and just remember like watching like the weird stuff that she ate. I was just like, "Ooh."
mhm,
Like, why would somebody eat like that, right? As a kid, I
mhm,
didn't understand it, and then of course, when I started working and working with all these women, they were forever on like the cottage cheese and something diet, right?
uh-huh,
Or tons of tuna, those types of things.
mhm,
And, and they were constantly struggling, back and forth. So it can even be, yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be like our home environment. It can be our work environment of what we're
mm,
constantly hearing
mhm,
as well too. So yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And then, as I shared, food for me became a comfort after my mom had
right,
a stroke, and then it continued to be a comfort after she passed away.
mhm,
And I jokingly said one day, yeah. I go for a nice walk in the neighborhood to get some exercise. And, meanwhile, I'm stopping at, 3 or 4 different places to pick up, gluten-free donuts or,
Mm.
or
Yeah.
there's a really good chocolatier down the street, like, yeah, I can buy all these really good quality things. Um, and going for a walk for me was dangerous because, I could
Mm.
take a path that would lead me past all of this delicious food. And
Mm.
while I'm walking, I'm burning off these foods as I'm eating them. Um, so sometimes we have to change habits around some of the things that we're doing as well too, to maybe you don't take that path that's going to go past your favorite bakery that makes really good really good pastries. You choose to go a different path. But yeah, food can definitely be that sort of emotional safety net or coping mechanism. And I guess that's partially what's sort of going on in our brain temporarily, right? We eat the food and we get that, um, I guess, positive feedback in some cases, that comforting sense. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I have loads of thoughts around that. Um, and I was relating to your walking and shopping, by the way. Yeah, when I was struggling with binge eating, it was a big thing of mine to walk along. There was a time when I was living in Europe and I would walk down the street and all these beautiful little pastry shops and just go one to the other, so that anyway. Um, but yeah, the emotional component is there, and it's again complex. I think, like in a scenario like mine, stress, anxiety, a sense of like feeling like I wasn't good enough. These were the things that would usually drive me to eat emotionally. Um, That said, I still deal with stress, anxiety, um, these types of things. Um, and I was able to kind of separate food from that. But I think the starting place there was almost the opposite of what you would expect. It was actually emotional eating is something human and okay. It's this permission, it's this unshaming. That's not a word, but unshaming. Um, because it's one thing to say like we eat emotionally all the time at a birthday party. We eat for joy, at a celebration. And when you have a great loss in your life, you have a meal to celebrate the loss of something that you loved, and also to grieve. Like emotionally eating isn't inherently bad. I
Right.
think we
Right.
lost. Oh, there we go. Um, but then on the flip side, it can become like something that we do to uh, kind of stuff down emotions and not really deal with them, or it's something becomes this habit that becomes like a problem, right? When it's happening too often. But again, if we can start from unshaming it and then come from a place of curiosity. And so if can I give like a little
Yeah.
exercise that so
Yeah.
if I was working with a client that was dealing with something like this, right, they're going to these shops all the time now after this emotional thing happened. Okay, so first things first, let's make sure you're well fed. So we double check that,
Right.
um, especially like in moments like this. We've got protein and carbohydrates to fuel the brain, and that makes sure that you're also not so reactive. You're able to think more clearly. So if we have that all in place, this person is well fed, then in a moment like that, we can start with one, permission. We take a moment, take a deep breath. It's absolutely okay for me to have a pastry or what have you, some chocolate. Like this is okay. And if they need help like figuring out why that's okay, I have bookloads of reasons. Okay? So then we start there. Nothing bad's gonna happen. I can go do that. Okay. 2, Curiosity. What's really going on right now?
Mm.
What's going on? Like, um, am I like what's going on in my body? Am I stressed? Is my heart rate up? Am I dysregulated? If there's a nervous system component there, maybe we can do something to calm your nervous system. Am I thinking about something that's bothering me? Like, what's really going on? And then the third question would be, what do I want? What do I want to do here? Knowing I'm allowed to eat, I could absolutely do that. And knowing that I want to feel good, because don't we want to feel good? We want to we don't want to eat to the point of feeling sick. We don't want to feel all yucky because we ate way too much of something that we didn't want to eat. We can, but we don't want to. And so we practice that with, of course, some nervous system regulation in there. And over time, it can be really, really helpful for starting to break that habit of using food. And it's not like we want to make food unavailable for emotions because, again, it's okay to use food emotionally, but it's that we want to have an option to not. And we want to have options to do something else that maybe could be more helpful. Um, yeah.
That's that I love that. I love that exercise. Um, yeah, it just it makes so much sense, especially the curiosity standpoint, right?
Mm,
Is why am I really feeling this way? What is what's missing or what's there that I'm trying to fill. I don't know if you've ever wrote or read the book by Doreen Virtue, Constant Craving.
mm-mm,
It's a really good book, and she has a little diagram in there that relates the cravings of certain foods to certain emotions.
mm,
So chocolate is, of course, always related to love. So, when you're
mm,
craving chocolate, and yes, there could be, say, for example, a magnesium deficiency or
uh-huh,
something like that. But it can also be that, if your magnesium's good, if you're taking a magnesium supplement and taking enough, it could be related that, you're just wanting to feel that love, right? And
right.
associate chocolate to love. So anyway, it's a very interesting book, but I love that little sort of graphic that she created to associate the foods to different emotions, because I do share
Mm,
that with my clients.
mhm,
And and again, just to give them information,
right,
it's like it's not, if you're feeling this, this is what the issue is. It's more of that curiosity. I'm
right.
craving the food. What is this associated to? So I love that. And then, as you say, that whole permission thing, giving yourself permission, um, because of course, once you've given permission, no reason to feel guilty.
Mhm,
And so we really, that needs to be really valid as well too, right?
mhm,
You wouldn't want to give yourself permission and then afterwards be beating yourself up about it, because now you've just sort of negated the whole thing, and that's not healthy.
right, right,
uh,
right.
so I talked a little bit about working with people with the diet culture and stuff like that, and the restrictive dieting. So I think we've sort of covered that a bit, as far as when we're restricting ourselves from food. At the end of the day, and a lot of people don't know this, or maybe it's not talked about enough, but the reality is our body needs, on average, like if we take average person lying in bed doing nothing, their body needs 1,200 calories just to lie there and do nothing, just to
Mhm,
do all of the functions that it has to do. And when I hear people going on some of these, and you know okay, I at one point was 30, I had 30 pounds on my body that I wanted to release. It's just something that I didn't feel good, like as far as my energy. Of course, I didn't like what I saw in the mirror, but but what was really affecting me was like the energy. I couldn't do the activities that I wanted to do. And then, of course, the other part that came into it is, the cardiovascular disease on both sides of my family. It's like, okay, if I keep going down this path, this isn't going to be healthy for me. Like, this is
Mm.
definitely going to take me into a realm of having health issues further down the line.
Mhm.
So okay, so I, did get back on track, and I lost that 30 pounds. Now, there are people who have more weight to lose. And, some of the things that I see, well, of course, Ozempic is a big thing now. A lot of people are taking it.
Mhm.
But previous to that, the HCG diet was very popular, where, it's a hormone that people are taking, and it basically, you know, really cuts back on their appetite. And people were eating about 500 calories a day. So, of course, they're absolutely losing weight. But the unfortunate thing is all of the effects that they're doing to their body. So when they stop it, because you can't stay on it forever, when they
Mhm.
stop it, they haven't been given any guidance as to how now to eat to support what's happening. And I guess when I relate that back to when I did my bodybuilding competition and the last couple of weeks where I was expending all of this energy and I was eating under 1,000 calories a day, the last
Mm.
couple of days were really low. Once I was able to eat again, my body was just like, give me food, give me carbs. Like, you've been putting me through all of this exercise, all of this stress, and you haven't been filling up what I need. And even from a logical standpoint, I knew I was eating too much, but I couldn't stop. And
Mhm.
so that's part of my fear as well too, is that people are doing these things, even if they're, being monitored medically, but if they're not given the guidance as to how to support their body afterwards, it to me becomes this vicious circle, both physically and mentally.
Mhm.
Um, what do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, there's a study that backs what you're talking about here. And I always like to what's that?
I love studies.
I will say, yeah, I always like to reference back to this one because I just think it's really powerful actually for people to hear about. So it was called the Minnesota Starvation Study.
Oh, wow.
And if you Google it, you'll just tons of stuff will pop up about it. Um, but Dr. Ansel Keys and some other people did this study. So basically, what they did is they took a group of healthy men volunteers, and these were, again, healthy people. They didn't have any disordered eating problems. They didn't, nothing there, right? Problematic that they knew of. And now you can judge the morality of this study, but it did happen. So at least we can learn from it. They did starve these men. Now, by the way, the starvation was a calorie limit of, I think it was something around 1,570
Okay.
calories per day.
Okay.
So I like to emphasize that because note that was starvation.
For men, that would make sense.
Right, right. And I mention that because there's so many people who are put on diets where it's way below that, and then and we wonder what's going on. So they were put on through this period of starvation, and they suffered the consequences of that. They lost a lot of lean body mass, which is one of the problems that can happen with these weight loss medications, right? That's why it's actually even more important to be fueling properly during them because you'll lose bone mass, muscle mass, and these really important things for your body. But when they finished the starvation period and they started coming out of it, these men showed behaviors of disordered eating. They were binge eating uncontrollably. They were actually, during the study, more obsessed about their body, more comparison, more mirror checking, um, more kind of like competition against each other to see how thin they could be. But when they came out of it, they even had binge purge behaviors where they were throwing up afterwards. And this is people who had no problem beforehand.
Wow.
But it's just this is why I like to share this experiment, is because this could we could create binge eating by starving people, and it's not like anything about morality of like what's wrong. This is just how our body works. It's just like, hey, we've been starving, and we need fuel, and we're gonna force you to do it with food noise, with cravings, with just this uncontrollable desire to eat. So it's natural, and there's nothing wrong with it. And but hopefully, we can not starve and create it so crazily, because it does feel crazy when it happens. Yep.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. What an interesting study. So it was called the Minnesota Starvation Study.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll look up that study and I'll post it down in the comments after the session. Thank you for sharing that, because yeah, that really does prove, right, that somebody could have completely normal eating habits, but then something happened that, they're forced to change the way they ate, and the repercussions of that. Wow. Wow.
Mhm.
And I think, and as I can't remember if I mentioned this before when we were talking or once our session started, but you know um men are starting to feel a lot of those social pressures around image and body shape and stuff, like women have felt for a long, long time. But with social media, it's
Yeah.
starting to get really bad that a lot of men are being sort of shamed with their body shape or the way they eat and stuff. And
Yeah.
so it's starting to be an issue for men. And maybe it has been, but it's being talked about more so. It was probably sort of one of those silent things, right? That, well, men don't deal with this because, they're comfortable in their bodies. But reality is they just haven't talked about it. They haven't shared it.
Right.
So that's really interesting. One of the things too that uh, is when you bring to a person's kind of bring to the forefront. I mentioned to you previously that I get my clients to keep a food and lifestyle journal. I always tease them. I say, well, I need you to keep this journal for a week to kind of show me what your habits are. The other option is I'll come live with you for a week, um, just to
Mhm.
see what you're doing. But
Mhm.
the food and lifestyle journal, I know for some, and of course, I work with primarily women, but I know that it can be um, somewhat triggering. It can also be a source of stress because it's like, oh my God, like this person's actually going to see how I eat. And I've actually had clients in the past where they weren't getting me their food journal, they weren't getting it to me. And I would ask them, like, you know, are you not recording? Like, or do you have a few days? And it's like, no, I recorded 2 days and then I had a really bad day and I ate a whole bunch of stuff that I don't even
Mhm.
want you to know about. And it's like, well, no, I want to see that. I want to see what's going on in your life. But when I see situations of clients like really not nourishing their body, not giving their body what it needs, it can be a really emotional situation for my client when I tell them that, essentially they're malnourishing their body. And, the signals are so mixed around, well, this is what you should look like. And the only way to do that is to eat a small portion of food. Yet nobody it's talked about more so now, but in the past, people didn't say, well, if you want a body like that, eat this way. You can have all this food. You just need to make different choices. You need guidance on what choices are going to support your body as opposed to not support your body. So, um, I'm sure you probably have similar thoughts that, if we're taught, what food is going to fuel our body properly, that's better guidance as opposed to saying, don't eat this, don't eat that.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that kind of goes back to why I drive concept of permission so much, because I mean, just think of this for example. Um, if we're like, okay, Connie, starting, let's see, today is Tuesday, so let's give us a couple of days. Starting next Monday, we're gonna cut out all sugar, all processed foods, and how about dairy too? Let's throw that in there. Okay. So now, what do we want to do the next few days up until Monday? We want to get in some dairy, get in some processed foods, get in some of our favorite sugary items, right? Because we're not going to be able to have them starting on Monday. And so, and this is like our last supper mentality, right? And it's a problematic mentality, but it also makes a lot of sense. Like, of course, you want to eat those things while you can for the last time that you ever can. And this is one way that restriction and that sense of like I can't have, I shouldn't have this, that is it really drives actually us to eat more of those things and think about them more, at least want them more, until our willpower runs out and we just eat them. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well too, I remember when I was a kid, during the week, it was sort of like regular meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and it was pretty simple food. I mean, there was always a protein on the plate, there was always a starch, and there was always vegetables. I mean, that, my parents were just very simple, practical cooks.
Uh-huh.
And I think that that came from their upbringing, right?
Mhm.
My dad grew up on the farm. My mom grew up in a rural life, not
Mhm.
specifically on the farm, but they had chores to do. They had big families. There was always things to do. So meals were always very practical. And it was weekends that you would, make a dessert to have to
Mhm.
share with the family, right? Whether it was a
Mhm.
cake or a pie or something like that or cookies. But it was more of a weekend treat that you would have that. And then other than that, you went back to sort of during the week, those practical, simple meals. And and I think now, one of the things that I say, and maybe I don't know, maybe it's kind of rude, but I do say that convenience has made us sick and unhealthy
Mm.
because now we have DoorDash or Skip the Dishes or Uber Eats or whatever it is wherever you are. We can order a pint of ice cream if we want. We can order anything that we want right to our
Mhm.
door. We don't have to move to go get that.
Mhm.
And and I mean, in my neighborhood, I was laughing because they're opening up another coffee shop, and within about a a block radius of each side of that coffee shop, there's
Mhm.
5 or 6 other coffee shops.
Yeah.
Well, they're never just coffee. They're coffee and donuts or cookies or some
Mm.
kind of pastry, right? So no matter where we go, it's always there, and people tend to eat out more. My parents weren't extremely well off, so they would save their money so that we could go out every now and then on for a special occasion or whatever. So
Mhm.
it was always looked at as sort of special occasion. But I think that's maybe part of what's adding to this as well too, is that we have so much access to everything. And uh we work hard, so it's like, I deserve takeout tonight. And so I guess, how do you provide guidance to your clients in those situations that convenience is at our fingertips, or you know, I've worked hard all week. I deserve to, have this big pizza all to myself or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a few different things there. So, I mean, even if I hear the word deserve, there's something there around deserving where can we just pull out deserving because it doesn't really apply here. You deserve to eat. You deserve to enjoy yourself. But let's see. Probably a specific example would be helpful here of one of the clients that I work with because you mentioned Uber Eats. It brought this to mind. So she had found that she was really struggling with overeating, particularly lots of different foods, but one really big food for her was Ben and Jerry's ice cream. Um, and I know that's
We've got good
a lot of people, yeah. So Ben and Jerry's ice cream, and she would often find. So what she would kind of do generally is, she go when she went to the grocery store, she'd think, "Oh, there's Ben and Jerry's ice cream," but you know what? I'm not going to get that because I don't want to be eating that right now, and so she'd avoid it, go home with her regular groceries. But then after the end of a long work week, and then she'd find herself on the couch at night, and she'd be really craving that Ben and Jerry's, and she'd end up Uber eating it to her house. um, and then she would end up overeating it. And so, how we worked through that was, first of all, again, back to nourishment first. We got her nourished, eating regularly, eating enough of the good foods, first of all, so that it was then easier to deal with this. And then we played an experiment. We had her go out when she went to the grocery store, intentionally buy some Ben and Jerry's while she was there. I mean, you may as well get it at the grocery store where it's cheaper and you don't have to pay for delivery, right? And get this like little one for like just the same price. So she gets it, and we have her practicing what I shared with you earlier, the exercise of permission.
right.
So now, a couple weeks later, after we had her go do that, we get on a coaching session, and I'm like, "Hey, how's that Ben and Jerry's doing that you got the other week?" And she goes, "Oh my gosh, Michelle, I forgot about it. I went to the store. I remember I got the Ben and Jerry's, came home. I actually popped it open and had a couple spoonfuls, put it in the freezer, and then I completely forgot about it." She was like, "It wasn't even as good as it used to be." And so this is just an example of where so there's a few components, right? Permission is the big thing here, but there's the intentionality around it, but there's also the eating enough. So it's all of the things, but that's generally kind of how I'll go about doing that, and it'll just look a little bit more. It'll look specific to the person's, life.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. There was an example, I saw Dr. Peter Attia share about cravings, and what he tells his clients or somebody that he's working with: if you're having cravings, acknowledge the craving and just say to yourself, I'm going to wait 30 minutes. I'm going to have it, but I'm going to wait 30 minutes. And he said, what you're training your body to do is that, it's sort of like Pavlov's dog, right? Like, get them used to hearing something and they come and they get a treat. And,
Mhm.
so in this case, it's like, I have the craving. Well, if we go for it immediately, we're reinforcing sort of that behavior. I've got a craving,
Mhm.
I get to have it, I'm going to have it.
Mhm.
But his whole thing was around, if you wait 30 minutes, you still tell yourself you're going to have it, but wait the 30 minutes. It registers in your body completely differently of that food that you're now eating. Sort of similar, saying to your client, just buy the Ben and Jerry's while you're there. I can't imagine what the delivery fees were on a pint of Ben and Jerry's ice cream,
Yeah.
but have it. And then, like she said, she had a couple spoonfuls and then put it away and kind of forgot about it. So it is that sort of that whole permission thing, like you're saying. It's like you're gonna have it, like you're allowing yourself to
Mhm.
have it there. But yeah, when we're fueling it at a different time, or having it at a different time rather than at that moment when we're sitting on the couch going, man, I would love some Ben and Jerry's right now. Oh, Uber Eats, let's go. It is registering completely differently, and we're fueling that that habit. We're fueling that whole process of what we're doing. And there's, I think, a completely different mental um, association when we're fueling it, because it's part of that excitement, right? Ordering it, waiting for it, and getting it. Um,
Mhm.
as compared to being at the store, yeah, I'll pick it up. It's a whole different feeling. So that's really interesting. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So we have about 10 minutes left. And you've shared a few things. One of the things, like as far as little tips go, one of the things that I wanted to mention as well too. So there are, so as we know, the majority of studies have been done on men, like research studies have been done mostly on men. So a lot of this information really doesn't pertain to women because, as I always say, we're not small men. I mean, our hormone makeup is completely different. Estrogen is, is such a, I mean, it's such a major hormone within our bodies. So depending on where we're at in our life, it's going to affect women differently. But one of the things that's becoming talked about more and more, and sort of getting away from this absolute intermittent fasting culture for women, because very few studies have been done on women with respect to intermittent fasting. So there's a lot of female doctors, researchers that are recommending that women do eat earlier in the day. And I was thinking about this the other day. So, in Chinese medicine, of course, in Chinese medicine, the body has a clock, right? Each major organ in the body has a different time that it sort of is processing and kind of has major energy going into it. And so the stomach, or the digestive system, like sort of the stomach and small intestine, its major time when it has its major energy is between 7 and 9 a.m. And so I see a lot of female researchers and doctors talking about women eating, you know, as soon as they get up, like within 30 minutes of waking, or ideally before 8 a.m. And I thought, wow, that's so interesting, because in Chinese medicine, that's when the digestive system sort of has its strength, right? Is at that time. So it makes sense that our body would really be utilizing that food so early in the morning, that really just sets us up for the rest of the day. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you, because it was just sometimes I have these little revelations. Maybe other people think about them. I was like, oh, that's so cool that that's what
Yeah.
they do in Chinese medicine, right?
Yeah.
And now we're seeing the benefits of women, eating early in the morning. And every one of my clients that I get them to do that, they're seeing great benefits, because it does make them hungry throughout the day, most definitely. So it's kind of forcing them to eat their meals throughout the day. But if they're giving their body enough nourishment during the day, come after dinner, there's no need to want to have more, because they've eaten enough throughout the day, which of course is then going to help them sleep better as well too.
Right, right. Yeah, you get this beautiful positive feedback loop, and yeah, and I would just add to that that that's my experience with my clients over and over too. When they start to get a breakfast, especially with a good amount of protein, fat, carbs, just a nice balanced breakfast, then they have more energy throughout the day. There are less cravings throughout the day, even less emotional eating for some of them, like even driven to like all of these good things. And then they're eating more regularly, and then yeah, like the drive to eat, overeat, or even eat things that they didn't feel good about eating anyway in the evening is significantly less for a lot of them. And so, yeah, it's just a really, really helpful way to start. And if that doesn't work for you that way, it doesn't make you like doesn't make anything wrong with you. This is where nutrition's individual, and it's like, okay, well, that's worked for a lot of people, and let's just experiment. Experiment with how that feels, how your body responds. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent, but yeah.
No, that's okay. And really that is what it's about. I shared with you earlier before our session started that I can tell somebody how to nourish their body. I mean, that's what my training is. I know how to tell clients what kind of nourishment they need based on, what they're telling me, as far as what I'm seeing in the food journals. I also take that one step further because I do look at their blood tests as well too. So their blood tests will give me little clues about how they're nourishing their bodies as well too, aside from maybe genetic issues. But all the information I provide from a nourishment standpoint is one thing, but the other thing is getting that client to buy in. And like you say, it's like, let's just try this little experiment. I do that with my client with coffee. It's like, can you wait 15 extra minutes to have that first cup of coffee in the morning? Or, okay, I kind of give them almost like a little bit of a fun challenge. Can we
Mhm.
delay it for 30 minutes? And hopefully what they're experiencing by making those changes feels good,
Mhm.
right? And so that's that sort of that positive reinforcement. So it's the same thing that I'm doing with my clients to try and get them to eat earlier in the day, especially the ones that were very staunch intermittent fasters.
Mhm.
um, it's like, can you just like have a couple spoonfuls of yogurt or something that would be pleasing to your palate first thing in the morning and see how that goes?
Mhm.
And yeah, like it, yeah, you can't force anybody to do anything, but they have to feel the positive benefits of what they're doing.
Right, right. Yeah, and it's if you're well, first of all, from the experiment idea, this is if you think about it, it's what people do for 12 step. Um,
Right.
can I try this one day? It's you take it one day at a time, right? You take it one experiment at a time. And then what happens is maybe you're like you're unsure about it. You're still kind of hanging on to the intermittent fasting idea. You're unsure about this. Okay, but if we can experiment, and you notice like, oh, I actually do notice a difference in how I feel. Oh, I did have maybe not so many cravings. Oh, and this stuff goes on, and then you start to embody it. And now it's one thing to have Connie, you or me tell somebody this is most likely going to really help you. It's another thing to live it and be like, wow, okay, that did help.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny how you say that one day at a time. I've actually changed it for one of my clients and said it's one meal at a time.
yeah,
Okay. If we mess
yeah,
up on one meal, like if we're suddenly feeling guilty about what we ate, well, the next meal we have that opportunity to turn that around. And that's kind of how we have to take it, one meal at a time. So
yeah.
I can't believe that our hour has
I
flown
know.
by. And I was just thinking, gosh, I didn't even encourage people who are watching to ask questions.
Oh, shoot.
I didn't do that. But anybody who
We
is,
could do that a little bit if you want.
yeah, like
Yeah.
if anybody has a question, by all means, go ahead and post it. And even if you're watching the replay and you've got a question, please go ahead and post it because if Michelle doesn't see it, I will see it, of course, and I'll make sure that if it's a question that's better for her to answer, I'll make sure that I do get the answer. But I have shared your website down in the description, so I noticed from there, like when people go to your website, there's lots of information there, but they can also connect to your various social media channels as well too to follow you on social media. And so, of course, they can reach out to you directly. But any last minute thoughts that you want to share, Michelle? It's been so wonderful to talk to you, and I guess we're kind of two peas in the pod, except we kind of look after maybe different aspects as far as what clients are looking for because I work with women over 40 and going through menopause.
Yeah.
But any last minute thoughts that you want to share?
Mm. Gosh, honestly, yeah, talking about how fast this hour went by, I don't know if you're familiar with the term conversation threads, um, but there are so many different threads that I had. They're basically possibilities of where the conversation could go throughout this whole whole time, and so there's so much more we could talk about. And I think, yeah, so there's that. But any last shares? So just thank you for having me on here. Yeah, like you said, we're two peas in a pod. We really resonate on and agree on a lot of things, and kind of the style of work that we do, which I love. And oh, I did want to share. I do have, if anyone wants to learn more about breaking free from binge eating, emotional eating, that specifically, I do have a free course you can take, and
Great.
it's a 3-day email course. And if that's okay to share, something that
Yeah.
is a good resource for people to kind of get started with some of these things like permission and kind of changing, getting out of the diet mentality. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's awesome. Thank you for mentioning that. That's great. And what I'll do is I'll just update the description. I can put the link directly to that 3-day eating course as well too, because I'm assuming it's just right on your website.
You know, it's not.
Oh,
I ought to put it there. But I can share the link for you for it.
okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, yeah, and then
So
I can put that on there. Well, this was great. Thank you so much for giving me an hour of your time. And I can tell that what you do, and just by all of your knowledge, you're very passionate about what you do, and that passion. It might initially have been self-driven, like for your own needs, but then when you realize, what you could do for yourself and how that helped your body, that passion, then we like to share it with others, right? We want to
mm,
help other people. So I really appreciate you taking the time, and it was a great conversation. I hope that this conversation has been beneficial. If you know somebody who is dealing with some type of an eating, what are we going to call it, Michelle? Eating challenge,
struggle with food,
struggle with food, they're really
yo-yo dieting. Yeah.
exactly. If you know somebody, and I mean, probably the reality is it's more common than what we even realize. But if you feel that this video would be something that would be good for them to watch, or sometimes, like I say, you can learn one little thing that can sit in the back of your mind, and then start to move you forward of, okay, maybe this is something that I need help with, or maybe this is something that if I'm working with the right person, they can help me start to change some of these habits. So please forward this video. One of the reasons that I do this is because I believe that it's important to get these messages out to women. So much of the information out there is about men and about men's health. And the more that we do videos like this, and the more that they're shared, it's going to benefit more and more women. And I believe that that's important, that there needs to be more compassion around food and our health, and all the things that women struggle with. And I believe that that's what Michelle brings to what she does, and that's what I bring to what I do. Is it really is all about compassion, and helping people feel their best. Most definitely. So thank you very much. Thank you for joining. Thank you everybody for watching, and I will be back next week. I hope you have a great day. Bye bye.
Right.